coordinator in Kenya. And essentially, we've got some very exciting public-private partnerships. And that's why it's a pity that CS couldn't join, that he got called by the president. But the team that you're seeing here from Kenya, we were all together in the Silicon Valley. And what we are trying to do in Kenya is harnessing big data technology and innovation to leapfrog Kenya's development agenda. So you'll hear some very exciting initiatives which are happening here, including the launch of a Google balloon in order to create better connectivity in the ecosystem, particularly of communities which are far off. So I'm really excited to join this particular conversation because in Kenya, this is very much government-led, and CS Machuru's office is tasked with really pushing the whole area of big data technology and innovation forward. Thank you, Darian.
Thanks so much, Sid. So yes, so today we're looking at beyond the VNRs, mobilizing support and building national partnerships. And in order to sort of get us going, I am just going to talk a little bit about the Partnership Accelerator, as this has basically been set up in order to try and build an ecosystem that is able to support the development of partnerships much more systematically at national level. And of course, Kenya is an incredibly good example of where they're working in many ways with platforms, with real government engagement, with the UN taking a strong lead, and also the engagement strongly of the private sector collectively to drive forward partnerships for the SDGs. So the accelerator was set up about sort of a year ago is when we first launched, and the idea really is to understand what is it going to take in order to be able to scale up partnerships for the SDGs. And actually now, of course, with COVID-19, we're looking at
Darian, just one second. Darian, just one second. Colleagues, can you all please turn off your mics and welcome PS Corrie, but please turn off your mics because it's interrupting Darian's speech.
Thanks so much, Sid.
Go ahead, Darian.
I think we're good now. Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good to see you, PS. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. I was having challenges, but I'm now in. Thanks.
No, now we can see you. So Darian, is Steve, who's the executive director of the Partnering Initiative, is just doing a short presentation. PS. Okay, thanks over to you, Darian.
Thank you. So the accelerator, as I mentioned, it's the Partnering Initiative. That's the organization I work for, which is an international NGO, which works across all sectors with business, with government, with UN, international NGOs to really drive partnerships for sustainable development, with the DESA as well taking a very strong lead, along with Global Compact, Office of Partnerships, and DCO. And the reason why it goes across multiple different UN agencies is because through this, we're able to reach companies, we're able to reach the UN system, and of course, we're able to reach governments as well. And the overall idea is that in order to deliver the SDGs, in order to build back better, we need to understand that there is a shared target, a common goal across business, across government, across civil society. We want to see prosperous society, prosperous environment, prosperous business. And our role collectively as the international development community and business as development actors is to try to realize this common objective, common goal. And if you look at any sort of societal system that is made up of all the usual sectors, plus academia and media and parliamentarians, etc., what we're trying to do with the SDGs and Build Back Better is, in essence, create collaborations wherever there is potential value to be created towards delivering the SDGs. And we want to create these partnerships where 1 + 1 is much greater than 2. That by combining the core business and investments from the private sector with policy and regulation shifts from government alongside the NGOs and the UN to be able to bring in the people side of this, that we can collectively drive sustainable, inclusive, responsible, and equitable development. So the big question that the Partnership Accelerator set out to answer is, how do we make that more systematic? What do we do in order to accelerate the number, the effectiveness of these partnerships for sustainable development? And we have this model of, which is kind of a theory of change, of what does the enabling system look like in order for partnerships to be effective? And we have these sort of 5 different levels of what needs to be in place to scale up partnerships. And the first one is about sort of national and international policy. So we need to build understanding of the role of partnerships within governments. We need to build understanding of the role of business in development with governments within the UN system. So that's a really important element, is getting people thinking about understanding the role of partnerships for development. The next level is around platforms for partnerships. We need the mechanisms that physically bring together business, government, civil society, etc., around common issues in order then to support and catalyze these types of collaborations. And we have a great example, of course, in Kenya, the SDG Partnership Platform, which really does exactly this. So really partnering at scale for impact that it talks about here. Maximizing investments through innovative financing. This is an engagement platform that makes collective action happen on the ground in country. Now, the accelerator has looked at the various different platforms, and we're delighted to launch this publication, Partnership Platforms for the Sustainable Development Goals, which looks at the practice of these platforms around the world. Surprisingly, perhaps, there are not that many of them. There are only a handful of platforms which go beyond public-private dialogue, which is common in many places. But these platforms go much further. They actually help to make partnerships happen, support them, often even bring in funding for these collaborations and partnerships. And these are an essential part of the enabling system. The next element is about, we need people to have the skills and competencies to partner. Partnering is difficult when we talk about working across sectors. We need people with the right mindset, the understanding of how other sectors work, the soft skills, the human relationship building skills, as well as the technical knowledge of how to partner, what makes for effective partnership. And for this, we have developed this SDG Partnership Guidebook, and today is the official launch of the first version 1.0 of the Partnership Guidebook. And this really does set out the case for partnering. It looks at what all the different sectors of society bring to the table, the challenges of working with the different sectors of society. It looks at the processes for partnering. It looks at the building blocks for partnership. And it involves a whole series of tools that are set there in order to help partnerships really be able to develop robustly and effectively. Along with the guidance, we've been running these national partnership training workshops, including the first one that took place in Kenya back in December. And these workshops both build the capacity of people around partnering and also simultaneously bring together people from across the sectors to have the conversations, to spark ideas for collaborations and partnerships to move forward. And we found this, it went down incredibly well in Kenya, and we are planning multiple different workshops moving forward in a number of different countries, including Samoa. We're delighted that Samoa is here today. The Maldives, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Mexico. But in the end, it's about wherever there is interest and desire, that the accelerator can run these types of national platforms. Then finally, the other final element of it is around organizations need to be institutionally fit for partnering. We see that often organizations are challenged because of their internal processes and their strategies, the culture and the skills just are not there to partner effectively. So we see this as another essential element, and we'll be building up the work to support governments, UN, international NGOs, etc., to change the way they work and operate in order to be able to take full advantage of all the partnering that is required for the SDGs. So finally, I'll just leave you with some of the principles. The accelerator is really about building the ecosystem of support and capacity that's required to drive the partnerships for the SDGs. We are ambitious. This needs to happen at a scale that is unheard of. We need collaboration in country, at national, subnational, local level if we are going to deliver the SDGs. It is inclusive So it is about, we will bring together partners of any kind that can help to drive this mission. It is country focused. It is all about partnerships in country, and this is reactive and reflective, as in we go and wherever we are invited and we create the material and guidance and trainings wherever there is a need expressed. And I welcome you to join the accelerator in whatever form is most useful. Thank you all very much indeed. Back to you, Sid.
Thank you very much, Darian, and that was brilliant. And obviously, I'm particularly delighted to see Kenya feature in your presentation, because it's a labor of love. Everybody who's attending this meeting should know that this has been a journey which started as way back as 2014, when 6 companies, GlaxoSmithKline, Safaricom, Huawei, Kenya Healthcare Federation, and Merck, decided to join UNFPA, UNICEF, and WHO to deal with high maternal mortality ratios in 6 of the most difficult counties. Everybody said it's not going to work. For the private sector, it was very unusual for them to go into a place which is, when you go into northeastern parts of Kenya, it has great deprivation, previously marginalized, but also the threat of cross-border terror attacks. And they actually decided to operate in that ecosystem. And in a matter of 3 years, this grouping actually had an impact of reducing maternal mortality ratios by 1/3 in 6 of these counties, where Kenya's maternal mortality ratio was 488 deaths per 100,000 live births, dropped to 360, which resulted in Kenya being invited to the World Economic Forum. And that was my first time, together with the CS of Health and all that, when a decision was taken in 2017 that we would go for a public-private partnership. And the foreign minister of this country then, Amina Mohammed, who, as you know, is now a candidate for the WTO, launched the SDG partnership platform. So it's now taken on a very exciting momentum forward. It's kind of, now we have 3 major platforms. There is an agriculture sector network platform and a financial and investment trade platform, which is bringing all of the UN country team, all of government, but spearheaded by the government and the UN and the private sector, which has joined it. Now we have close to 70 companies, both local and global, that have joined it. And in the chat box, I've just left a little article published by 2 great intellectuals in the Silicon Valley domain who welcomed us in the Silicon Valley. And it was a joint visit of the Ministry of ICT, of which PS Korir, who actually leads the entire youth agenda in Kenya on behalf of the cabinet secretary and the president. And we went there, and it was quite remarkable to see the level of interest the Silicon Valley actually had in what could be done in terms of disruptive technology. And therefore, this harnessing of big data technology and innovation is where we see ourselves in accelerating this decade of action, because without that, it's not going to happen. And I think the COVID-19 crisis has made it even more clear that, partnerships are going to be key, not only to come out of the crisis, but to, in terms of the socio-economic recovery. But if we need to get to 2030, it was John Donne who said, no man is an island, every man is a piece of the continent. So with that, let me go straight to Kenya, and I would invite PS Korir to unmute himself. And my question to you, PS Korir, is what can governments do to ensure that there is an enabling environment for mobilizing support and fostering national partnerships? What examples are there of policy legislation that actively supports partnerships for sustainable development? PS Korir, over to you.
Thank you, Sid, and everybody on this meeting. I think it's a great privilege and honor for Kenya to be in the midst of all the participants to share on its experience on areas of partnership promotion, mobilization of support, and rallying institutions and organizations to action. First, apologies from the Cabinet Secretary, who would have really loved to be with us on this meeting, but unfortunately, he has had to, he's still in another cabinet meeting, which has taken longer than usual. So he sent me to represent him. First of all, I think as Sid has said, Kenya has a wide range of experience in the area of promoting and mobilizing actors to partnerships. In the field of, we have the overarching national vision, which is Kenya Vision 2030, which again is implemented in a way that brings everybody together, that is government together with the stakeholders. And then together with the UN, we also have a framework which we call UNDAF, UN Nation Assistance Development Framework, which is a partnership between government and the UN body in Kenya to ensure that programs of each are aligned to the government vision, as well as also and are aligned to the objectives of the individual organization. So we as a Kenya, it is a norm that we involve everybody in everything that we do. I think the basis of this is through our constitution, which has embedded the need for consultation and collaboration in anything that we do. Even when we're coming up with legislation, there has to be a critical input for the citizens to make input into whatever we do. So as a country and as a government, the way of partnership is a way of doing things, is a norm with us here. Sorry. Then I think even with the regard to implementation of the SDG, as a country, we have put a framework together where we work together with all the partners, and we have put up what we call, just a minute, we call it SDG Accelerator Lab, which is a partnership which we are discussing today. But again, for the SDG, we have a multi-sector interagency technical working committee, which has the mandate to spearhead the rolling out of the activities identified in the SDG roadmap. And this one brings together both actors in government as well as also development partners. And it offers technical backstopping to the SDG implementation in the country. The activities of this interagency working technical committee focus on mapping of stakeholders, as well as establishing partnerships and domesticating those international experiences to suit and localize them to suit our specific situation in the country. This committee also looks at how to promote advocacy, promote sensitization, resource mobilization, capacity building, and the training and monitoring of all the goals that have been put in place. And so this way we are able to track and be able to see the implementation and the impact of what we are working on. And I think, as you may be aware, this committee is co-chaired by the government with the CSOs and the private sector. So we have each party is equally represented in this committee so that we make sure that all views and aspects of the requirements of everyone is factored in. I think, as you know, as I've said, due to our constitutional framework, legal framework, it's no longer sufficient to have a bipartisan agenda between governments and development partners, but the dialogue needs to adopt. The dialogue approach is required, and it should be more inclusive so as to ensure that there is coordination in action and also harmonized approaches at the country level, instead of working in silos. So as a country, we have those frameworks in place. And I think, as you know, we have this SDG Accelerator Lab, which again, the Kenya SDG Lab creates a new model where government, UN agencies, and private sector and academia can deliver as one in an ecosystem which optimizes and synergizes by also building the required capacities and innovations with all the partners. Kenya, again, is regarded as the hotbed of innovation, as I think you've seen when it comes to tech innovations. As a country, we have been doing very well, and we normally say Kenya is rising and the opportunities are unlimited. However, the ability to thrive in the fourth industrial revolution era and become a global leader will be down to the harnessing of immense opportunities that it has as a country, and by building deep and meaningful partnership with the UN global partners, as well as the private sector. And I think when you go to our innovation hubs and labs, which we have in the country, when you visit any one of them, you find partnerships that are international in nature, where people come to test their concepts, test their innovations and ideas with the bubbling minds that we have here in the country of well-educated young people who are tech savvy. So for this reason, and recognizing the groundbreaking potential of the twinning the innovations, research and enterprise capacities of Silicon Valley in the United States and Silicon Savannah in Kenya, our government signed a communique in September 21st last year in New York, and I think Sid has alluded to that. And with this, we hope that our government will be able to leverage on what is available out there. In addition, also the government did launch the co-created SDG Accelerator Lab that that is bringing together government as well as also private sector and civil society and all the philanthropic and academia. And again here, the idea is we want to co-create success together with all the partners involved. So I think, Sid, what I can say is that we have a framework, we have a tradition, we have a practice where we involve and bring partners together with a view to co-creating solutions that affect the society. And I think in terms of one of the objectives of the lab we have in Kenya, especially looking at what we are mandated, which is to promote ICT in the country as well as also empowerment of youth. The fourth objective of the lab is to promote youth engagement and employment through promotion of the creative sector. And to back this up, we have several policies. We have the ICT policy, which is very clear on what we need to do as a country, which again underpins the need for collaboration. And then we have also the Kenya Youth Policy, Development Policy, which was launched last year. And we had a meeting earlier in the month of May with all the development partners to sensitize them of this youth policy. And the idea there again is harnessing the innovative power of youth in creating solutions that are scalable, solutions that address human societal needs and problems, as well as also enabling young people to make money out of those innovations. And in the process, the country leverages and takes advantage of the population or youth dividend. So we as a country, I think we have the framework, we have the platforms and the tradition, as I've said, on how to leverage and work with the partners. And we also, all this action is supported by policies and legislation that I've alluded to. The Kenya National Constitution, Kenya Constitution 2010, which is very clear on how programs affecting the citizens are delivered. So, Sid,
Thank you. Thank you
I
so much.
wanted just to mention that briefly.
That was excellent, and actually that's an excellent entry point actually to my next question then, to Francesca Strickland, who's the Assistant Chief Executive Officer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade in the government of Samoa. So Francesca, what are some of the examples of national partnerships for SDG collaboration? And what are the challenges and what are the key success factors? Over to you, Francella, sorry, my apologies if I mispronounced your name.
No, thank you, and good morning from us here in Samoa. And also like to thank the previous presenters for their very interesting presentations. And I think the accelerator partnerships that has been mentioned, I think we're also working closely to build in the area of health, especially when it given the measles and also now the COVID situation. And I think I was very interested in what Kenya was talking about. We also have youth collabs, which we try and encourage innovative, but we're a lot more small scale perhaps compared to Kenya, but I think those are really important. And I think it's been linked a lot. And I'll give an example of one of the key national partnerships, I mean, through the youth and through innovative means, and with government providing a better coverage of ICT, there's been a lot of more improvement in the use of technology for empowerment, for economic empowerment of women. And I think one of the key examples we highlighted during our VNR presentation was how persons with disabilities or people in the villages are using apps and virtual markets. And we saw the usefulness of this, of improving ICT and these frameworks when we had the COVID-19 situation with all the lockdowns. A lot more, the schools had to switch to going ICT, but more importantly, people could still manage businesses and still get their goods out there through the virtual markets. So I think these important innovations and using some of these frameworks to improve the connectivity, but also still provide economic empowerment for women, and especially for the rural areas, is one of, I would start off with that important example of how we are trying to look across the board and linking the ICT improvement with improving the quality of lives of people in the rural areas and of course the vulnerable groups. For Samoa, we always recognize that a sector-wide approach and a whole of society approach is key. And that is why for us, this approach means that we need to meet our national, regional, and international obligations. And it also ensures an enabling environment for mobilizing support and fostering national partnerships. Our sector-wide approach also ensures the SDG implementation is suitably contextualized and is part and parcel of the overall national planning, budgeting, and accountability processes. Now, we have very similar frameworks that we try and put in that do encourage, strategic partnerships. We have what we call the SMERF, because we try and do the sector-wide approach, the SMERF, or the Samoa Monitoring Evaluation Reporting Framework. One of the key components is that each sector looks at participatory outcomes mapping. And this tries and bring in all the key stakeholders, including donors, the industry, the state, and all the different other stakeholders when they come up with these sector plans. And this is how we, for example, have partnerships where the independent power producers in the energy sector, they are key stakeholders not only in formulating the sector plan, the energy sector plan, but all the way to monitoring and evaluating how these plans are made. And they come up with key partnerships so that, for example, Samoa meets its NDC commitments on the Paris Agreement, et cetera, et cetera. So all these are some of the interlinkages, and it cuts across. So it also tries and bring in youth in some of the biomass gasification projects. So this is how we try and create through the SMERF and encouraging these different stakeholders in not only shaping the sector plans, but also on coming up with key partnerships. Another key policy framework that we do have, we also try to have quarterly joint dialogue with key development partners. And this is very important also in trying to identify some of the key cross-cutting plans that help, it's not only about, it's about mobilizing the resources or utilizing the limited resources that is there to create opportunities, and so that the partnerships cuts across all the different SDGs. One thing I also want to highlight, Samoa is one of the few Pacific countries that dedicates financing to civil society support. As you know, in Samoa and for small island states like us, it's very difficult for CSOs also to, be more involved. So there needs, we've tried to bring together with the agreement of some of the development partners and pool funds between government and partners to allow community-based projects. And that's where you have then, for example, women in communities buying. They can be small projects, but they are game-changing for some of us. And I think that's where the difference is for us as small island developing states. It could just mean buying sewing machines so that the women can do some of the materials that they can also sell. So these are some of the kind of SDG projects I wanted to highlight. And then we also have our Ministry of Public Enterprises, which regulates and manages the implementation of public-private partnerships. And we have a PPP framework that is governed by the PPP Steering Committee. community. And so we have some of the bigger partnerships, such as the Samoa Submarine Cable Company, which is a PPP between 3 financial SOEs and 3 private telecom companies. And again, this is again trying to focus on improving. And from our VNR review report, we highlighted that there's been great coverage in terms of ICT or internet connectivity across the country, which is really important for small islands like us. And I has mentioned one of the examples before. What are some of the challenges? Well, we could have all these frameworks, but as per usual, some of the key challenges is now we need to improve the execution and delivery of the plans, policies, and the systems in a coherent, efficient, and effective manner that harness the collective strength of government, private sector, civil society, and our external partners. And I think this is one of the things that we continue to struggle with. Secondly, we also need to ensure that our development partners, both external and national, need to play their part in ensuring partnerships are genuine, mutually respectful, and uses country systems, and that we are jointly accountable for results. And I think these are some of the ongoing challenges that we continue to work collaboratively on. What is clear is the VNR process and the SDGs provides an important opportunity and platform to bring together all stakeholders, encourage better alignment for more efficient and effective use of limited resources to deliver the implementation of all national and international obligations for a better quality of life for Samoans. I'm not sure how I'm doing with time, but I thought that I can do that as just like a start, and I'm more than happy to answer more questions. But I think from Samoa's perspective, this is very
Thank you, Angela. That was excellent and a really good summarization of what you're doing. But we don't expect anything less where our dear colleague Simona is the RC. I've worked with her. We worked together in Iraq during very, very difficult times. So I think we've got a fantastic colleague in her. Let me now turn to Alan John, my countryman from India. Alan, so what does it take to run effective national partnership platforms which convene societal sectors around SDG priorities and catalyze implementation of innovative initiatives? Alan, over to you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot thank you very much for having me here. Nice to see you there. Good morning, good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for the kind introduction also. I appreciate everybody who has put in efforts to organize this VNR Lab and those who are participating in it during this difficult time. Many thanks to DESA for conducting the VNR Lab this year too. I recollect participating in a few of them last year, which are very useful, extremely useful in understanding how countries approach SDG localization, science and SDGs, resource mobilization, etc. Before I go into today's theme, I would like to mention that India presented our second VNR yesterday morning. Our VNR report is titled Decade of Action from Global to Local. So this time we have followed an inclusive and participatory approach of the preparation of the VNR report. We involved over 1,000 CSOs in the report preparation. We have leveraged our existing partnerships and built new partnerships to do this particular task. I'll talk a bit more about this later in my presentation. The topic of this VNR Lab couldn't be more relevant. In a fight against a pandemic, we have realized again that no one actor can do the job all by itself. We need the government to work together with the healthcare sector, for example. We needed technology firms to join hands with the government and the healthcare sector. And above all, we needed the people to be responsive and responsible and cooperate with all these response efforts. So we can see strong partnerships, written and unwritten, in all these initiatives. Today, we are more than ever certain that only strong partnerships can help us fight common challenges and achieve common goals. I would like to go straight into India's recent experiences in building national partnerships. The learning from our experiences can be summarized in 2 points. To be brief, both these are from a government point of view. The first thing would be to reach out. Reach out when you need something, and equally importantly, reach out if you can offer something too. The second point would be a government must understand that they alone cannot do everything. So let me briefly go over this. About reaching out, achieving the SDGs requires a large array of initiatives. All of us have realized that by now. We have limited time and resources. Now, working together with multiple organizations and agencies is not an option, it must be the way of doing things. In this regard, it's important to reach out, to tell people that these are our priorities, and we will be happy to take your help. This is exactly what we have done with our SDG priorities for 2019 and 20. We decided that we need to prioritize on three things: SDG costing and financing, private sector engagement, and science, technology, and innovation for SDGs. Then we started talking about them whenever and wherever we talk about SDGs, in internal and external meetings, conferences, workshops, etc. When we started talking to stakeholders in this fashion, and where we told them that we want to work in these areas, then building partnership became much more easier. Another example, which is recent in this regard, is the government of India reaching out to more than 92,000 CSOs in March this year, requesting their assistance in fighting the pandemic. We wrote to them, we urged them to support local communities in collaboration with district administration. The states appointed state and district level nodal officers to coordinate these efforts with NGOs. This step has benefited thousands of people in their hour of need. It's also important to reach out when you have something to offer instead of you needing something. We have put in a lot of efforts, time, and resources in developing something, but it doesn't mean that someone else too has to do the same. If you're working towards common goals, it makes all sense to share our success. This is a method precisely which we have adopted in our SDG localization efforts. We have developed SDG monitoring system at the national level. We have an indicator framework. We have the SDG India Index, which ranks all our states on the SDG performance. And we have an SDG dashboard. Through these efforts, we had also identified the states which need considerable acceleration of the SDG efforts to meet the targets on time. So what we did is this: we reached out to them, visited their capital, sat down with the planning departments and nodal officers of other departments working on SDGs. We shared with them the model indicator frameworks and the technical protocols of dashboards. As a result of all these efforts, many states have designed their own state indicator frameworks. In February this year, at the SDG conclave for 8 northeastern states, all of them launched their own state indicator frameworks, which we think is a very good development. Coming to learning number 2, it's important to realize that the government need not and cannot do everything by itself. A lot of efforts, it's best to leave to the people who can do it best. The highlight of India's VNR this year is the participation of CSOs and community organizations in VNR report preparation process. We have identified 14 priority population groups, such as people living with HIV, children, women, farmers, LGBTQ, etc. We have also identified lead CSOs for each of them. These CSOs were assigned the responsibility to identify the stakeholders, mostly from the civil society space, at the subnational and local levels, organize and host consultations, and bring out the stories, experiences, issues, and solutions from the grassroots. All this fed into a chapter in India's VNR report. Over 1,000 CSOs participated in this exercise. At the end of all of this, we realized that we could not have done it in a better way. Before I conclude, let me briefly mention the challenges and success factors we have identified along the way. While building partnerships, it's very important to identify common interest. Now, it's very usual that the government may want to talk about the achievements, while the CSOs may want to highlight the issues and the pending work to be done. But both these actors, to a large extent, have different mandates and interests. In building partnerships, it's important to identify the common interests, design initiatives, and deliver outcomes meeting the common interests. Outside the scope of this collaboration, the parties are free to pursue their own common interests. This results in outcomes, learnings, and knowledge sharing, which will not materialize if the actors work independently of each other. In the interest of time, I will stop here. I would like to thank Juventus and all participants in this VNR Lab once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alan. And I would just request the panelists to keep an eye on the chat box. There are many questions coming up for you. So please go to the chat box, take a look at the questions which are specific to you, and perhaps you could respond to everybody there. So with this, I would invite our colleague from Finland, Rima Pursianen, the Partnership Advisor in the Prime Minister's Office in the Government of Finland. Welcome, Rina. Over to you.
Hi, thank you. Good morning and afternoon and even night to you all, and thank you for organizing this VNR Lab. And I would like to send my special welcoming to the colleague from India. Your presentation about your VNR process with over 1,000 CSO actors sounds like a big undertaking, but very inspiring. It is extremely exciting time to talk about partnerships Finland has built over the years, and especially during the latest VNR reporting cycle, since right after this session, our Prime Minister Sanna Marin will first speak at the opening session of the ministerial segment, followed by our VNR presentation led by the Prime Minister and the Minister for the Environment and Climate, alongside some key stakeholders. So we are also building partnerships in our VNR presentation. So all in all, this presentation that I am giving is just a nice little warm-up for the actual VNR presentation. Finland has a long history with building partnerships on sustainable development policies. The National Commission on Sustainable Development is a multi-stakeholder platform led by the Prime Minister, and it has been functioning for nearly 30 years. This forms the backbone of our sustainable development policies. One of the main outcomes of the Commission's long-term work is the whole of society approach we utilize in accelerating small and big sustainable development actions. Most concretely, this approach can be demonstrated in two examples. One, the online tool called Commitment 2050, which is my main job, that allows all kinds of actors, from individuals to major corporations and cities and ministries, to take part in our sustainable development policies through operational commitments. There are about 2,000 commitments done, and they come from all sectors of society and remind us that partnerships can come in all types of ways. The second one would be this year's VNR, even though in this session we are going beyond the VNRs. But in this reporting cycle, we tried some new intensified participatory methods in order to really deepen our existing partnerships and to build new ones. The government invited some key stakeholders like indigenous Sami people, cities, regions, business sector representatives and young people to write directly to the VNR. On top of that, over 50 NGOs and other civil society actors assessed the progress in our official VNR report that complemented the assessment made by the state authorities. So this concluded that we have an external civil society assessment on the progress in our official VNR report. Incorporating the evaluation and texts from our partners as such was a great way to deepen the mutual trust and understanding between the government actors and other actors. Dear colleagues, when I was asked to talk about successes and difficulties in building and maintaining partnerships, 2 points came to my mind. First, the trust and communication between partners, especially between those who might have differing stances on various issues, is important. All parties involved in a partnership need to be able to trust that the other side will not use its power to spin the outcome of the partnership into their favor or against the other partner. Communication is especially important in expectation management when the partnership is between a government actor and a civil society actor. Everybody has to be on the same page on what the intended outcome of the partnership is and how much involvement the partners can expect to have in the final product. It is one thing just to be consulted and a very different thing to co-create something. Secondly, partnership building and maintaining require a lot of resources, especially time. Coordinating tens and tens of various stakeholder groups in various networks, some more united than others, can be difficult. It can also be difficult to know if you're collaborating with the right stakeholders at any given moment. It can be easy to fall into more trusted long-term partners than to start building up new partnerships with new organizations and stakeholders. But sometimes that is necessary in order to make sure that no group is being left behind. To conclude, partnerships can look very different depending on the topic at hand, but they must always be mutually beneficial, and they need to be allocated enough resources and attention in order to be fruitful and long-lasting. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much, Veena. That was excellent. And I think a lot of us here in Kenya, we really value the strong partnership we have with Finland, and particularly your ambassador here, Erik Lundberg. And actually, they've been really at the front end of reaching some of the most diverse and far-off communities in this part. So we really commend Finland, given the history of Finland, which has come from real poverty and has really shaped the development narrative. So you stand out as an exceptional model without any natural resources where you have, as a nation state, come to. So bravo, it was important that you joined this discussion because Finland inspires hope in countless countries all over the world.
Thank you. I think you brought a great point in donor action, and one of the key elements in our donor policies is to do our development cooperation through civil society actors in the receiving country in order to really get a hold on to all the communities that maybe the state actors could not reach that easily. So thank you for bringing that.
Thank you, Reena. Okay, now can I just we'll quickly go to Q&A now, and I just wanted to remind the panelists that there are a series of questions which are waiting for you in the chat box. So please go to the chat box, and I would then come back to all of you just to make a 1 minute this thing because we are close to finishing on time. Simona, if you could just kindly come in very briefly. Let's get a UN perspective from a small island state. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sid. And let me also say how inspirational the engagement of the government of Kenya has been in the partnerships that you developed since, I think, 2017, when I was still in New York and working closely with you. Great success, and that speaks to the passion and the knowledge of the government on one side and of you as resident coordinator in Kenya. I would like to share a few reflections and build on the great presentation that was made by the government of Samoa. You can see the government of Samoa also committed to building effective partnerships. So first of all, we are happy to report that we will be working with the Partnership Accelerator around some of the challenges that Samoa is facing, and primarily looking into the response, the socioeconomic response to the pandemic. And I very much hope that other countries will follow that particular track, understanding that partnerships require dedicated and knowledgeable teams to identify the right partners, to contextualize the partnership to the culture, to the human environment in which we operate, and then nurture such partnerships moving forward. So first of all, Samoa does have a series of interesting priorities at this point in time. Digital transformation, building a knowledge society, also a collab and an accelerator lab that is supported by the United Nations are in place. However, there is need for more capability around, again, partnerships that involve across the board all of the stakeholders. And in this regard, I would like to encourage both the Partnership Accelerator as well as our audience to look into the latest report of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation and the country profiles to see where exactly gaps are in terms of engaging private sector and civil society. The quality of partnerships is a parameter of measuring effectiveness of development cooperation, and we have a very good update on that across the world. So that's a way to see where exactly the gaps are. Very importantly, the Partnership Accelerator brings extremely valuable examples and lessons learned since its establishment. So it would be very good if governments listening to us, if if donors listening to us could employ this particular mechanism and this initiative to help countries come up with, again, dedicated teams for building partnerships with the necessary tools and knowledge to allow us to move forward in the response to the pandemic and in dealing with all of the threats that the world is facing. One word about the Pacific here is that we talk about very cohesive societies in small island states and in the Pacific primarily. Voluntary engagement, partnerships that do not necessarily require financial investments come immediately as there is a threat or there is a priority that needs to be supported by everybody. So the partnerships in the Pacific need to consider this cultural dimension that is critically important to ensure that the ecosystem operates well. Very importantly, donors' engagement in the Pacific is very predictable, is very stable. The same great partners, Australia, New Zealand, European Union, Japan, China, South Korea as well, are there to respond when there is need. So ensuring that the ecosystem brings stable partners is critically important as well. In the measles crisis in the Pacific, we saw 45 emergency medical teams supported by multiple governments. That was a great example of response, but this needs to become a nurtured ecosystem moving forward. And I will close by saying the following, a message for all of us involved in the response to the pandemic. The biggest challenge of all, I would say. We've developed a framework to respond to government's needs. We need these partnerships to be factored in as an enabler across the pillars that we put there. We need then to draw on the resource we have with the Partnership Accelerator to actually make it happen. This is critical at this point. If we disregard that, partnerships could not be developed while we are already in action. Partnerships need to be conceptualized at the very beginning. And again, we look forward to developing a financial mechanism for the Partnership Accelerator to be able to operate. But let us all agree that partnerships require art and science and specific knowledge. And if we have that capacity in-house, we should be able to leverage it throughout. And again, congratulations to countries that presented the VNR this year. Samoa is one of them, and it has been an interesting journey in building it and moving forward. We hope that around the findings we can develop a great partnership, and we look forward to bringing to Samoa Darren and Ola Goranson, the UN DESA, to work with us to that effect. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Simona. You know, I think, colleagues, we probably have pretty much run out of time, because I do want to give every panelist just a 1-minute close down. So please do take a look at all the questions that are there addressed to you all individually and some collectively in your chat box. And with this, let me just call back Julius Corrie, the Principal Secretary of ICT and Youth in the Ministry of ICT, Youth and Innovation. Actually, it's led by a fascinating man, the Cabinet Secretary, who's an ex-Google employee. He used to actually be the head of Google in Africa. And the entire profile of this whole ministry is extremely young, just like it is in the government of Finland, very, very young people. Julius Corrie, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Sid, for that, and very nice words about our team. And really, as you've said, it is a team that is really geared to the work. I think just to add finally is looking at the questions that were given to the panelists on what donors can do better to support effective national partnerships. I think the first thing is to look at what are the strategic objectives that governments have put in place in terms of addressing a societal need. And then based on their objectives, they can be aligned. And then with that, now we pool resources together, pool effort and synergize to be able to deliver. I think, Sid, you know, in Kenya, we have UNDAF, United Nations Delivery Assistance Framework. This is where government, together with the UN bodies, come together, I agree on objectives, agree on targets, agree on work plans, and then we identify a team leader from government who is champion and a champion from the UN, and then we deliver on that work plan and framework together. So I think that would be the same thing I would insist here, that let's first of all understand what each government is planning and has laid out to do, and then now we synergize our activities and our plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, PS Corey. Can I now invite Franchella Strickland from Samoa? 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think there was a question about some of the challenges for us in terms of ICT. And for us, one of the cross-cutting challenges is the threat of natural disasters and external shocks, which is an ongoing, no matter how successful we are in any partnership and all that we do in SDGs. And this also includes the health crises, because Samoa, we call them the twin crises. We have the measles epidemic, and now we have the COVID-19 situation. So this is an ongoing threat to the success of any partnerships that we have to put up with at the moment, which includes ICT. And in terms of ICT also, while we have seen an improvement in connectivity, affordability, and accessibility is still an ongoing challenge. And I just wanted to also add my voice to the last question that we're giving to the panelists on how we see donors to better support our national partnerships. For Samoa, it's simple: support our sector-wide approach and use our country systems that we have in place. And I think together we can then be both held accountable for joint results, and because better coordination is crucial. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Franchella. Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Sid. I have tried to answer around 3 to 4 questions which are directed to me in the chat box. So I will continue to engage with them. So I just wanted to I mentioned that we realized in India, we realized the power of partnerships 3-4 months ago during when we started our COVID-19 response initiative. We realized that this is a task too big for the government to handle alone. So we reached out to more than 92,000 NGOs. We wrote to them. So we have been receiving a lot of positive response from the kind of work that they were able to do. So it comes from the realization that you are sitting in the capital, you have a certain mandate, but that doesn't cover everything. SDG 2030 is a huge agenda. So the only way we can do it is you invite more stakeholders, you invite more participants to the table. Let the best person to do a task take care of the task, be responsible for that. So when we realize that it's difficult to reach out to everybody in every corner of the country, we decided to take the help of the CSOs and NGOs. I think that's a way forward, and we don't want this VNR to be just a document where we have done something, we have just put a lot of figures and facts on what we achieved in the past 3 years. We want it to be seen as a beginning of a new phase of engagement where we discover also as we go month by month, we discover which are the new areas and which are the new modalities which we can develop with the NGOs and other stakeholders in taking the agenda forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan. And I suppose it just reminds us what the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us is that if we don't have an all of society, all of government, all of partners approach, there is no way we will defeat it. So I think it allows us to reset, reimagine, reignite new modalities of doing things. So that was really, really helpful. Rina, over to you.
Thank you. The biggest thing that we've learned during this voluntary national reporting cycle is that partnerships that work best are partnerships that are organic and are something that both us here in the government are getting something out of, but also the partners that are doing it with us. I think the biggest thing that we can now do is to, for instance, look at the NGO and other civil society actor assessment made by them and compare them to the assessment made by the government and see where the differences are, where we have to build more understanding with in terms of the government and the civil society actors, but also between the civil society actors. This was a great partnership building exercise amongst themselves to kind of see where they are with their SDG readiness assessment. So this was a great exercise for us, and I would really encourage everybody else doing their VNRs next year or in the future to really amplify partnership voices in the VNR, but not just kind of create them from thin air, but to build them over the years. So then when the time is to report, you have the mechanisms ready to go. Thank you.
That was really, really excellent. So what I would just want to, I think we've come to the end of time, but what I do want to say is that perhaps this is precisely the modeling that we need to see happen in this whole new ecosystem that COVID-19 has shown us. What we've been trying to do in Kenya, I believe we can actually collaborate much more between Kenya and India, Kenya, Samoa, look at South-South cooperation where there could actually be a cross-learning opportunity as well. So I really hope that Ola and Darren would have taken note of this, because there are places that we could easily see points of convergences, particularly all three countries would be concerned about the blue economy, which is going to be another multi-trillion-dollar opportunity in the global ecosystem. Darren, a last word from you, and then we can come to a close.
Thank you so much, everybody. I guess my last word is, well, first of all, it's just inspiring to hear all of these stories and all of the incredible action that's taking place. And I'm going to bring it down just to one element, and that is the role of leadership. The only way that we are going to be able to drive forward the collaboration required for the SDGs and to build back better after COVID-19 is if we all pick it up and run with it. We all say, right, we are going to make this happen, whether we are business or government or the UN or NGOs. We all need to say, we are committed to this. We see the vision of where we are heading towards, and I will help to take my company, my organization, my government forward to work collectively together. And it is that leadership that we've seen on the panel here today, and it's that leadership that is what is going to allow us to deliver the SDGs moving forward.
So I love to finish at the end with a quote, and my favorite quote is George Bernard Shaw, and he said, "Some men see things as they are and ask why, and some dream things that never was and ask why not." I believe we've come to that why not moment of the decade of action, which the Deputy Secretary General often says, flip the orthodoxy. This is the time we need to get into that mode of a sprint, and that can only happen through partnerships. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues on the panel, everybody, thank you very, very much for coming in. Thank you for enriching this whole conversation with great examples from all your countries. And all I would like to say as a resident coordinator in Kenya is I'm truly privileged to be in a country that really has embraced big data technology and innovation and taken this to new heights. The M-Pesa system itself is a perspective that shows you what is possible. And this is where the future production and consumption is going to happen. The largest demographic dividend is here. So thank you very much. God bless. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah, cool.